The opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of our sponsors and are only those of the individual commentators. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, and with me is just part of my expert panel, just Christina today. Christina, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Elliot?
I'm good. Anna is away this week, so joining the panel are two guests, one of which is returning guest Victoire Tshibangu, and the second is new guest Jahvier Wright. How are you both?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me.
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me back.
Of course. So, Victoire, can you just remind our audience a little about yourself?
Well, last time I was on the podcast, I believe we spoke about influence of music on the culture. So, I personally, in terms of who I am a software developer at BMO, and I also do some sort of investment on the side by myself, privately. And that sort of gives a bit of a background about me. And I do enjoy traveling quite a bit, to be fair. And I do have a flight coming up in a few days, getting out of here.
Yes, we know you're super excited to get out of lockdown Ontario, where it's the only place where golfing is currently illegal. And of course, Jahvier, can you tell our audience a little about yourself?
Well, I'm a 22-year-old entrepreneur. I do a little bit of investing, work at the casino, but due to the whole COVID thing at the moment, the casino's closed. So just trying to network and do some other things, keep myself busy in the meantime.
That's awesome. We are, obviously the casino industry, Vegas is not working out right now.
Yes.
But we are so excited to have you both on the show. We're going to have an incredible discussion on our main topic. But first, before we get to our weekly update, it's time for the Raben Rant, our mission and online abuse. Last week, we produced what I believe was an open, honest, and eye-opening discussion on gender identity. We were very fortunate to have Noah on our show as our guest, and most of the feedback had been positive. Now, the Raben Report is no stranger to criticism, and if you've been watching the show since its inception, you'll have noticed a lot of changes made based on those criticisms. Unfortunately, some of the comments we received last week were reprehensible. If you don't like the show or the way that it's produced, that's fine. Don't watch it. If you don't think that discussions on important issues with people of different perspectives are necessary, then this isn't the show for you anyway. I have produced 96 episodes of the Raben Report over the course of 5 years, so I will not be lectured on whether my show is balanced or not. There is never going to be the perfect balance unless you have every person of every opinion in the world, and even then it won't be balanced. I wonder if you'll consider tonight's show balanced. Who knows? And to those of you complaining that my show isn't a safe space, to a degree, you're right. It's not a safe space where you'll only hear the opinions you want to hear. The whole point of the show is to express whatever someone feels. You'll hear things you agree with and things you don't. That's what I consider a real safe space, where someone can say what they want and we can debate why they should or shouldn't think that way. It's called free speech. So, back to the negative comments. You can express your dislike of the show, but when you base your opinions on assumptions that aren't based in any fact, that's what I'm not going to take. More importantly, though, when you make your attacks personal, not just on me, but especially on my team, you don't deserve to watch this show. The comments from some of the people last week, you should be ashamed of yourself. How dare you attack my team for simply being who they are? How dare you attempt to invalidate their experiences? Well, that won't be happening on my watch. Now, don't think that I have to fight their battles for them, because they are more than capable. But it's my name on the show, and it's my reputation on the line. Christina and Anna are incredible people, incredible panelists, and I will always stand up for them. I will also always stand up for all our guests, because they too are incredibly passionate, knowledgeable, and worthy of being heard. Watch my show, don't watch my show. That's up to you. But don't you dare come for my team's or my own integrity. Thank you. Well, got that off my chest. Now, let's move on to our weekly update. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll be talking about our main topic, but first, the coronavirus pandemic update. As always, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. Starting May 3rd, people 18 plus can get their vaccinations in hotspots. Moderna is planning to deliver more than 1 million doses in May per week, as there is now a surge in vaccines. A new organization called Vaccine Hunters has been created to help people that are looking for vaccines find them. Ford has also asked the federal government to extend their hotel quarantines by 3 more days, because most of the cases are results of the variants, and that's because flights are still coming in. You can't drive through Ontario, but you can fly through, right? So feds have also said that Canada will come up with certification to allow COVID-clear Canadians to travel again. In other words, vaccine passports. Now, is this a good idea, or are there too many privacy concerns? Victoire, I'm going to start with you.
I believe that it is an utterly ridiculous and preposterous idea, to be fair, because it does infringe on the Charter of Rights of Canadians, particularly considering the Privacy Act. People have the right to be private within the person and the matters that they do carry on themselves, and the government further infringing, utilising COVID-19 as a weapon to further grasp on the liberties of the people is something that, looking at from being from someone who's not from the country here and having fled the government that was literally perpetrating the same sort of characteristics that I'm now seeing here, it becomes more clear to me that this idea, let's say the virus here, COVID-19, has been weaponized to a degree at which many never thought possible. Perhaps some have realized and perhaps some haven't, but on my point of things, I believe that the further it carries on, the less and less rights people in this particular country will have, and you come to see that with some of the recent mandates by Ford. You can't go to the park, you can't be sat at any bench whatsoever, literally controlling every bloody aspect of your life, except those that they allow you to do so, and infringing upon the privacy of people's health. In this instance, with vaccine passports, I think it's a step further onto whatever it is that they're attempting to achieve.
Jahvier?
Well, definitely hit it on the nose there. I would say I feel like with this whole vaccination thing, it's a little bit of an invasion of privacy. I feel like, to begin with, this whole virus thing was really a lot for all of us to have to deal with. So I feel like, being that there's 4 different vaccinations or 4 different companies or brands or what have you out right now, I would need more guarantee, more of like just the government to be able to let us know that this is something that we can be sure that our kids are going to be safe from, our elderly, our family members are going to be able to be safe from. Because, how long does it really take to make a vaccine? There's no way that this whole thing is 100% after us dealing with this for about a year. So I feel like there's a lot more work that might need to be done.
Yeah. I said on the show last time, I've been vaccinated. I know that I'm kind of part of I'm a guinea pig, right? So far, so good. No issues. I did have some side effects the day after. I was a bit tired. But I will say the vaccine, I seem to be handling it just fine. I think some recent research just came out that Pfizer is able to protect against these new variants. So that makes me feel good. And of course, I'm high risk. I have asthma, so it would not be good for me to get it. So I'm kind of just taking what I can because I want to I want to be safe and feel safe. However, with the whole vaccine passport thing, I think that it is an infringement on human rights. We can't start having people expose all of their medical information, we already our privacy is already so invaded by our phones, by the social media platforms we use, whatever. And the idea that they're just going to continue to extend that and we're going to just be tracked in all these different ways is scary to me. And there's people are exempt from vaccines. There's people who can't get these vaccines, whether or not they don't want to, or there's a medical reason or personal reason that they can't get it. And then to put them on blast for that because they can't get it and they don't have a vaccine passport, I think is unfair. So while I do have a lot of faith in vaccines, I've always gotten all my vaccinations, and I kind of took the risk with getting this one. I do think that we still need to respect people's rights to either not get them or
Right.
not have to publicly share that information.
So what's the way out of this? I mean, we're over a year in now. Like, it's May 2021. I was thinking about it today, the fact that, final season of the Raben Report, final month, but May. How are we still in this situation and worse off?
Well, it's being managed by a very rather incompetent government, I would say, to the likes of Ford. I mean, his ratings have dropped tremendously due to his draconian sort of approach to this whole particular case. I mean, if you look at all the examples, even let's say in America, for example, states such as Texas or Florida, ever since they have dropped the mandate concerning the masks, you have realized that the number of cases have also dramatically dropped simultaneously. So there's a bit of a correlation there. But when you do go south of the border, you do realize that more people tend to be happier the more they do have their freedom given back to them. And the fact that it's being so intensely pushed upon everybody, this whole war, putting a mask for everybody around you, I mean, it sounds all good in theory, it sounds quite like a utopia. However, in internally speaking, people are genuinely hurting, whether that is mentally speaking or suffering from further substance abuse, because it's much closer for them to utilize and than it otherwise would be if they had more of the freedoms given back to them. So you are seeing rates surging in suicides. As I said, addictions, they're all surging and alike, right? So how do we get out of it? I believe the only way to get out of it seriously for the government to consider reducing the measures that particularly impose on the people at this particular moment, and that would help sort of revive what little people have left, and would kind of give us our spirit and kind of get out of it. Because when you look around the world, as I mean, in Europe, even in England, for God's sakes, where it was even worse than Canada with multiple variants, they have reopened. All my mates are sending me pictures and videos of them enjoying life as they otherwise would. It is a catastrophe and a shambolic way of dealing with this particular virus. And Trudeau should be ashamed of himself.
Period.
Strong words.
Very bold statement.
It's true. I mean, everybody's kind of putting blame on each other, saying that everyone's, I'm not at fault, this person is. Well, everyone's at fault because we're in this situation. And like I mentioned at the top, Ontario is the only place in the world where golfing is currently illegal.
Or not being allowed to go on a walk with somebody outside of your household, even if you're wearing a mask. There's things that don't make sense. They go against the science. Why were we told that we could, get together with people outside and now we can't? And if we do, you have to have a mask on and you have to be distanced. It's getting to a point where it just feels like this is never going to end, and the restrictions are just going to keep going. And I don't blame you for wanting to get out of here, Victoire. If I could, I would.
Well, you bring up a good point, which is restrictions are getting worse, which brings us to our next item of business, Bill C-10 and censorship. So the Liberal government, the federal Liberals, are proposing Bill C-10, which would allow the Canadian Radio and Television and Communications Commission, the CRTC, to regulate user-generated content uploaded to social media platforms as it regulates radio and television. Now, the feds say changes will only apply to professional content that are necessary to online streaming services so that they can contribute to Canadian culture. Critics, however, argue that they amount to an unjust infringement on the Charter of Rights guaranteed two freedoms. Now, in its Origin's Bill C-10 exempted user-generated content posted to social media sites. That meant professionally produced shows and songs, streamed to Crave, Netflix, Amazon, would be subject to these regulations, but music videos on YouTube, podcasts on or Facebook live shows, what have you, would be exempt. But now they're saying that they want to include this, and the Conservatives are against it. The NDP said they'll consider supporting it. What do you guys think about this? I mean, is it fair that we be regulated, literally us, be regulated by...
I've always taken a hard stance on this. I don't agree with censorship. I mean, obviously to an extent, depending on the circumstance, if it's, harmful or dangerous. But I've always been anti-censorship, especially in the medium. We have freedom of press in this country, and I also feel like we don't know enough. I mean, there was that clip that came out. I think it was either CTV or CBC interviewing. I can't remember who the individual was, but he couldn't tell you what this bill was. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't justify it. So I feel like I need to know more about it, and I don't think that I do. But I am anti-censorship, especially when it comes to the media.
I feel also just like a part of these new orders and these new rules is just also a way for the government and the system to kind of have more control over what we're doing. We're in a society right now where technology is growing and things are expanding every day. So the government is seeing these things, and as much as they don't want to seem like they are a part of these things, they want control and they want access and they want just rights to all of these things. So I feel like these are the reasons that these things are taking place.
Right, I also believe it is quite a dangerous idea because, I mean, if you are censoring any sort of speech that the person may be able to deploy in a way to express themselves, I mean, they wouldn't be able to actually genuinely express themselves in a way that they really, really wish to do because you are, I mean, it may be 95%, 5% of that speech being, I suppose controlled by the government because they don't want you to say one thing or another. But this kind of would lead you down a bit of a rabbit hole of where it started with a little thing being taken off, and then next year or 2 years from now, you'll say, well, we regulated this particular sort of speech. So why don't we do the next bit of speech and then let's see how it goes. It's kind of how it starts slowly but surely. It was a 2 weeks notice to control the curve. We are now in 1 year and we have no rights to go into parks and have a suntan because the government said so. I mean, it really starts really slowly, but as time goes by, you see that the grasp on your rights, now freedom of speech, so to speak, they're being slowly squeezed out of their lives, to be fair. Similarly, in the States with, I believe it's 230, the bill, in which basically technology or big tech can control sort of...
I apologize, I'm so sorry.
No, big tech can control what sort of speech they decide or content they can basically censor or decide to portray to the audiences on those particular sort of platforms. I mean, it is purely expression of a person that's being controlled, and that has led to very, very hard situations for people to be able to portray certain ideas because they feel censored and cannot move forward.
So it's essentially just another power grab, and like you said, it starts slowly.
It
right?
does,
yeah,
always,
and that's how it creeps in, like with the measures that you mentioned of the four governments. So that concludes our weekly update segment. Now let's move on to our main topic, which is Black Lives Matter. As I started our episode on activism today, I'll start this show the same way. If the past year has taught us anything, it's that people are vocal about what they dislike. Sometimes they're so vocal that they're often called or self-described as activists. Tonight, we're going to focus on one particular activist group known as Black Lives Matter. According to their own website, hashtag Black Lives Matter was founded in 2013 in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer. Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, Inc., is a global organization in the US, UK, and Canada, whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on black communities by the state and vigilantes. By combating the countering acts of violence, creating space for Black imagination and innovation, and centering Black joy, we are winning immediate improvements in our lives. So that's from their website. Nearly a decade later, Black Lives Matter is still at the forefront of local, national, and international news. Protests have taken place largely in the United States over the past year, especially following the murder of George Floyd last May. While most people agreed that his death was a tragedy, the discussion on criminal justice reform that emerged in the weeks after Floyd's passing was quickly overshadowed by the rioting, looting, and violence that broke out in major cities such as Minneapolis, Seattle, and New York. Dozens of people were killed or injured in the violent unrest, and thousands of businesses and properties, many minority-owned, were looted, torched, or otherwise vandalized. Supporters would argue that protests and violence are often necessary when fighting for justice. Well, that, along with many other questions pertaining to the BLM movement, is what our panel will answer. Joining us tonight once again are Victoire, Tshibangu, and Jahvier Wright, who we are very grateful to have on this important show. This is a very sensitive topic, so we'd like to remind our viewers that viewer discretion is advised. And once again, this is an open platform where we are going to have this discussion. Our guests are able to say whatever they feel, and we're going to debate it. And as always, we are live on Facebook, so make sure to comment on our feed to have your thoughts read live on air. So let's begin. In your eyes, I mean, I read the definition of it, but in all of your eyes, what is Black Lives Matter? Christina?
I believe that Black Lives Matter is basically, as a movement, it's to bring justice and healing to Black individuals who have faced injustice for, for a wide range of things, not just police brutality, but also white supremacy, systemic racism, that sort of thing. So I think BLM aims to bring justice to these people who have been victimized and continue to be victimized.
Okay. Jahvier?
Well, personally, Black Lives Matter to me is this is not a movement. This is a lifestyle. As a Black man, I feel like I'm confident within myself. I know that I wake up every day and I'm ready to do what I got to do and just get it done. But that doesn't change how society sees me and sees anybody else who looks like me. You know what I mean? So to me, Black Lives Matter is, I would say, a lifestyle.
Okay. And Victoire?
Black Lives Matter. I believe personally that the words Black Lives Matter do actually have a great powerful message, because if I were to say that they don't, it would be quite silly of me, since I happen to be of such a complexion, to be fair. So I do believe wholeheartedly that they do matter indeed. However, as an organization, personally, I do believe it was started out of a good heart of the people, the foundation of it. However, from what I've seen, it's gone adrift from its main purpose to become a very politicized movement that caters to particular sort of issues that happen once in a blue moon and are very intensified by the media to perpetrate certain ideals from the oligarchs who do fund this particular movement as well. That's how I see it.
Interesting. Okay, so we did ask our audience on Instagram and Reddit two very specific questions, and we're going to ask our panel the same thing. But first, the first question was, do you support the Black Lives Matter organization? And Christina, what were the results on Instagram?
For the organization, we had 26% of people said yes, they support the organization, and 74% said no.
Okay.
Thanks.
And on Reddit?
And for Reddit, the question that I posed was a bit different, but I had, let's see here. Okay, so 27% support both the organization and the message.
Okay. Well, that's our second question. So obviously the majority of people said they don't support the organization. Well, the second question was, do you support the Black Lives Matter message? And what were the results on Instagram?
They were 72% said yes, they agree with the BLM message, and 28% said no, they don't agree with the message, which I have to just weigh in, kind of baffles me.
Really?
Definitely baffled me as well when I see those results.
I mean,
I just want to I just want to say, just to whoever voted on the poll and just to whoever is watching, I want to get something clear. Black Lives Matter, the movement, is not okay, so what you're seeing online, you're seeing protesters. There's protesters. Those are the people that are out there trying to make a change, trying to really show the world that there's issues here, and we need to get to a resolution together. There's rioters, which are the people who go to these rallies and go to these protests, and they want to flip everything upside down, and they just want to create the ruckus. Then there's the looters. Those are the people that, you know, are breaking into the stores and doing all that. I don't want anybody to get it confused or get it, I feel like, mixed up, because Black Lives Matter, the movement and the protest, is to enlighten the people around us and to show everybody that we need to do better as a whole.
And that you won't be silent.
I feel like we need to disconnect the rioters and the looters, I feel like, from the movement, because those are completely different, you know, different aspects of the whole thing.
Definitely.
Okay. Victoire, how do you respond?
In terms of the polling, well, as I said, it's fair that the people say that they support the message. Overwhelming majority say that they support the message, however, not the organization. I would suspect, for the same reason that I perhaps do align with, being the fact that I believe the movement has lost its sole purpose. It's centralized around very once in a blue moon events that happen, incidents that they tend to push forward as being the overwhelming reality in America, which in this instance I don't believe concerning the data, because it doesn't particularly back up that particular claim. If, let's say, for example, when it comes to police shootings, I suppose you are highly likely, 2.5% highly likely to get shot by a police officer being a black person than you are a white person. However, you have to look at the rate of those crimes being committed.
Well, we are going to get to police later on in the show, but I just want to stick to the to movement. But you know, the police relate to the movement. But
it does.
But let's move on then. So one of the things that Black Lives Matter says is that they're trying to stop systemic racism. They're trying to end systemic racism. Now, the question is, a lot of people say, what is systemic racism, and does it exist? So, Victoire, I'm going to start with you.
Does it exist? Why? In what sense do you mean? We could take a look at a few examples. Say, we could take a look at a few examples, right? We could take a look at, say, for example, police diversity, right? They do. The organization tends to claim that the police organizations in America, they tend to be very white supremacist and such things. Well, let's take a look at two of the biggest cities in America, that being New York and LA. When you look at the diversification of the population in there, you do realize that there is 29% of the population in New York being Hispanic, 32% being white, I believe 24% being black, and 13% being Asian. And that's overwhelmingly really well represented within the New York police department as well. So the idea to go along and say, well, this very diversified police department is still a white supremacist department is counterproductive, and it goes against what the data reflects, because as you can see by the data, it can't be an overall white supremacist organization because of how well distributed every race is within that particular department.
Okay.
Personally, there's definitely a systematic issue with within. I would definitely say, to begin, can give you guys multiple examples. I mean, even with just black individuals getting jobs, you know, you can have a name that looks, you know, come off as, you can be John Doe, you know, and you show up to your job interview, and the minute that the hiring manager sees how you look, your appearance, that is based on if you're going to get that job or not. That's just one example. I mean, I can go on. There's multiple examples of systematic issues in our society at this moment.
So when we talk about systematic, though, you know, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the legal system? Are we talking about personal biases? Where's that word coming from?
I think that systemic racism is specifically looking at the systems and institutions we have in place and the racism that lies within those, and whether or not something is explicitly racist. Like, it doesn't have to have a label slapped on it that says racist for there to be aspects of it that are racist. For example, and besides race, women face this too, the gender disparity. There's systems that have been built and have existed for decades, that when they were created had racist policies put in place. And unfortunately, even though we're, 50 years later, they're still affecting minorities, whether or not, I'm trying to think of exactly how to explain it, but basically when we're looking at systemic, we're looking at all institutions and systems that exist in our society, and the fact that whether they may not be explicitly turning away Black folks, but there could be a system in place where the way that business or organization operates, it doesn't cater to Black people, or
So what do you mean by that? So when you say these institutions,
So just for example, I mean, as far as I know, it doesn't exist anymore, the wage gap between races, but there was definitely a point in time when there was segregation, that Black folks were being paid less than white folks. And when you're dealing with these wage gaps, it takes a lot longer to get over them than people realize. People think that we can just close the gap and everything goes back to normal. That's not the case. And like I said, whether or not we actually see it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Things happen behind closed doors, and it's beyond race as well. And I'll speak from the perspective of a woman, because I am somebody who is white passing despite being Latina. So I've faced my fair deal of whatever, but as a woman, going in I've had jobs where I've been like at the forefront in a store, and the treatment that I'll get from male customers was not respectful. It was demeaning. Even from bosses commenting on your appearance, telling you how you're supposed to behave as a woman. It's things like that are embedded in the way that organizations and companies work, and they may not explicitly say that that's what they're doing, but it still happens.
Even to touch on what Christina's saying, even as far as the way these businesses want you to come to work, like Black people, they want them to come with their hair a certain way. You have to come with a certain attitude, because off the bat, there's this stereotype, or there's this saying that Black people are angry and they come off like they're just full of rage, and you just have to show up a certain way, and you have to come across and come off a different way being Black. I personally feel like
people and people often will say, like Black people will say, that there's a face that they have to put on in a business setting because they are interpreted as angry or aggressive, and they have to put on it. Of course, it depends on the individual, but there are people who have to put on this like different persona because they're expected to act a certain way. And the hair thing is a big one. We see with girls and boys in school, especially in America, being sent home because their hair isn't braided or their hair isn't pulled back. It's like, these are things that you would never tell a white person. So it exists. These things do exist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Victoire, do you agree or do you disagree with what they've said about systemic racism and that it's within our institutions?
I believe that when it comes to such things, a person, first of all, I believe in meritocracy. I don't believe in any person being particularly favored because of the way they look. That to me is absolutely silly when I think about it. And having quotas to have a particular type of race being included in the workforce, I mean, that to me really, not just according to me, but according to data, it does diminish the amount of efficiency that's being produced by said company. Therefore, for me, let's say, for example, if I want to hire someone, I would hire them mainly on their abilities to accomplish that job. And if the applicants who do apply to my, say, company happen to be 100% women, and they do achieve my standards of what I deem acceptable, then at that particular point, I believe that my whole company will be full of women. However, if the opposite happens, the opposite also would be true, right? So that's how I look at it. And when it comes to, let's say, jobs and such things, people have to spend time being personally responsible and cater and hone these particular skills that are needed to be able to accomplish certain tasks in jobs and being able to get them to a next promotion and such things, right? So how I see it when it comes to that, according to what I've read and the data I've seen, I mean, when there was a study that was being done, that was done a few years back, and what they did was they looked at the name white people sounding name, black people sounding name, and Hispanics people sounding name as well. So what it did was it did forward these fictitious names to certain companies to see if they would elicit a response that was genuinely based off how the name sounded, and then see what the disparities would be between how they chose concerning genders, ethnic background, as well as race, right? When all was said and done, what they did find was 11.4% of all applicants were the people who received a callback, which is a standard in any job application whatsoever. And from those studies, we also did see that there were no significant drastic disparity being made on an applicant's acceptance simply because they were a woman of a different ethnic background or a different race.
I'm just trying to sum up and fully understand what you just said, but I feel like I might disagree with what you're saying.
Why?
From what I got from it, I just don't feel like that's
Accurate,
I would say. There's definitely a systematic issue with race when it comes to the working field, and
I'm proof that there isn't.
but I
Hold
think
on.
Well, I would say
I've
that
been able to hone my skills by spending time day in and day out working in
Okay,
and out.
but
I've lost my eyesight, which is why I'm wearing glasses, due to the fact that I spent 24 hours without sleeping to make sure that I got the job that I wanted at the bank that I wanted.
But my brother, I just want to say something to you. That is you, because that is your work ethic. That is how you put your work in. We're talking about these institutions and these systems as a whole, how they choose to portray us. You portray yours. Yes, you put in the work and you do what needs to be done to get what you want, but that doesn't change how society views you.
But the thing is, I don't look at myself with the mentality of, well, they determine how I look and how I live my life. I mean, the first thing I do is control how I look like and how I portray myself to the world, right? So if I'm getting out of my house, I choose to get out of my house looking a particular way, the way that I want to be looked at, not the way that they wish I should look like, right? When it's all said and done, what I'm trying to say is if your skills on your resume say that you are able to accomplish this job with such efficiency and with such speed, better than 90% of the people who applied at the same job, you will be accepted to that job. And I've proven this many times. I've recommended people.
This is not true.
I suppose we live in different worlds then, eh?
No. We're living in the same world, which is Earth. And
what part of it is not true in your eyes?
I would say now I'm realizing the entire thing that he said. I feel personally like, yes, you can black people can go to school, they can go to Harvard, they can go to Yale, they can put in all the work, they can study, they can take extra classes, and you can show up wearing your brightest outfit and you can have the best attitude, but that does not change how society is going to see us. At the end of the day, we are still African American, which is fine, and that's what we're going to be till the end, but we need to change within ourselves and change as a whole so that we can change and we can see these things differently. I mean, like I've said, like you show up and you put in your all, but that doesn't change how the system works.
And
you know what I'm saying?
I think just to add to what Jahvier is saying is that you can be a successful black person and still run into issues in society. You can work hard, you can be successful, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to run into some form of racism or some form of trouble. Like you could be a totally professional, successful black man, but you're still going to be at risk when you walk at night, or when you get pulled over by the police. At the end of the day, you still are a black man and you still have that appearance, whether or not you're successful or you make it in the workforce.
Regardless of how hard you work or how much time you've put into your craft, at the end of the day, that's just how the system, I feel like, is set up, and that's just how it is. So for you to say that you don't see that, it's kind of, I'm kind of confused on that.
All right, listen, I mean, what I believe is that you have your own destiny in hand. You control how people see you. The change begins with the individual, not a group.
No, the change starts with us.
Exactly, it starts with an individual. How I choose to act is how the world would decide to see me. I would say I mean, it is true. I mean, how you decide to act is how the world will see you. When everybody woke up in this room, I didn't look at them and say, well, he's white or he's Jewish, therefore he must be this particular way. Right?
I'm sorry to cut you off, boss, but this is what I'm saying. This is how we see things. This is us, because we were born and we were taught to love everybody, to be accepting of everybody, because that's how things really should be. But that's not how everybody thinks. You get what I'm saying? You feel like everybody is equal. I personally feel like everybody deserves equality.
I don't believe everybody is equal. I'm a better runner than you may be, right? Naturally speaking.
I didn't hear exactly what
I said, I don't believe everybody is equal. I may be a better runner than you may be, right?
You don't believe everybody's equal?
No. In what sense? In what sense? Do you mean on a physical level? No, definitely not.
We're not talking on a physical level.
No,
we're talking on.
You have to define what you mean, because you can't say just that.
Well, we're talking about Black lives. Do you feel like your life means the same as John Doe's life? If you were to go outside and you see John Doe on the street, does he mean more to society than you mean?
Probably not.
Probably, or just.
Well, it depends on what value I bring to society in that sense. Right?
It doesn't matter what value you bring to society. As a human, when you're born, you deserve the right to.
Listen,
eat,
I'm not saying
to drink water, to be respected, and to the basic.
I am not saying that people.
You don't need to have a certain title or to earn a certain name to be respected. Is what I'm going to say.
I am not saying that people shouldn't get equal treatment. I am all for equal opportunity. What I'm against for wholeheartedly is equal outcome. People deserve to have equal footing where they start off, so they have the same opportunities to get and change their lives in a way that they believe they may be able to do. That's what I believe. I want you and I to walk out and go to the same job and apply for it and have the same opportunity and have the same executive.
As we should.
That's what I believe. But what I don't believe, it's for both of us to have the same outcome. Although I may have better skills, or you may have better skills to accomplish that job than I do, I want you to take it because you believe you have the skills required. You merit the job, therefore you get it. I don't want us to be allowed in for the pity of us being a different race because they have to fill a quota. That to me is demeaning and disrespectful. I would never appreciate that. Not once, not forever. Not ever.
I just want to let you. This was not between me and you.
I'm making an example.
I understand that, and I mean that in the sense where this is not between me and you, because personally, me and you, we're similar in a way, and you know what I mean. We're similar. So I'm talking in terms of you being in a room, or you applying for a job, and your counter colleague who's applying is Caucasian. You guys can both have the same credentials, the same skills. You guys can both went to the same colleges or universities, and he can still get that job over you just based off of his race. Is what I'm trying to say to you.
Unfortunately, the data doesn't back that up. That's my point.
That is okay. That is.
I was just gonna read a couple comments. Jahvier and I have a friend, Terry, who seems to have commented, and she said, as a black man, you can be successful as can be, but you are still a black man first. And I think that speaks to the fact that you can be successful, but you're still going to be seen a certain way by certain people.
So what do
and another comment, and this is from Kobe. He said, to be honest, if one human, regardless of their skin color, is a thief, and another human, regardless of their skin color, is a business person, the business person is probably worth more to society, which I think is what Victoire is getting at. Is just that we should all be treated equally, and we are all equal in terms of respect, and our right to live and to live a safe life.
So
I think what it means is that, you know, if you're a murderer, you're probably not as beneficial. Well, you are not as beneficial to society.
No, definitely understood.
Yeah.
So this touches on 2 points. Number one, I think where there's a bit of a discrepancy is the question is society racist, or does society have racist people?
Both. I would say the answer is both.
Okay.
I don't think if you have a society where there's racist people within it, then you have a racist society.
But it's a matter of are the majority of people racist, or like how does it?
It's unquantifiable. How could you quantify the majority of people being racist? You would have to literally go in their head to be able to determine that. You can't measure that on a silver platter.
Not in this day and age. People are blatantly
Well,
racist.
the ones that can admittedly display it publicly, those you can, because you saw the proof that they did. But if someone is thinking something in their head, how could you then say, well, they never expressed it, right? how could you then say, well, this
Well, then
person
that-
therefore
then I would
must
say-
be because they
Well, then that
look like
person I
the
wouldn't
person who
say-
expressed
I'm
that
sorry,
opinion.
go ahead.
I mean, it would be impossible for you to say, well, simply because this person looks such as person A who expressed these racist thoughts, right? Therefore, they may be similar in that train of thought as well. That's why I find it troubling, because that to me then seems like a fairly racist input on the person who's making that particular point of stuff, because then you are assuming someone is a particular way simply because of their looks as well in that end. Wouldn't that be kind of similar?
I see what you're saying, but I'm trying to bring this back to it.
Gotcha.
No, you definitely didn't get me. I'll say that. Definitely didn't get me. What I will say is, at the end of the day, being a black man in this society, in today's society, yes, we've came a far way. We've come a long way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a lot that needs to be done in our society for us to all be equal.
And what do you see that as? What needs to be done?
I would say a lot, but we need to just start with just accepting one another and just learning how to unlearn maybe habits that certain people have grown to believe or just grown to build within themselves. I have a few other examples of things that we need to change, but that's for the next topic. So
Yeah, that's that's fair. So here's the thing: are America and Canada more racist now than in the past, or is it a different kind of racism, or is it not there?
I think it's a different kind of racism, and I don't know if we're necessarily as racist as we once were, because I do think that as a society we have progressed. We're like, for example, we're sitting in a room right now with a Jewish person, a Latina, and two
Exactly.
black men. This is not something that would have happened during the segregation era. So of course we've made a lot of steps towards equality and to treating people, black people especially, treating them better. But I do think racism exists, whether or not people are explicitly saying they're racist. It can be something as simple as, okay, so let's say there's a party and it's filled with white guys and there's 3 black guys there, and somebody's wallet goes missing. There's people in that room at that party who are automatically going to point fingers at the black men because they are, and whether or not it's unconscious, they're going to put it on the black person because that's what they've been conditioned to believe, that black people are criminals. And I think that's still an issue we have. And the
Do you think that's the majority of people?
I don't think it's the majority of people, and I think especially in Canada, we are a very diverse and multicultural and accepting country, and I think we should be very proud of that. I don't think it's the majority of people, but I do think it exists more than we realize, because not everybody comes out and talks and says, hey, I'm racist. There are people who do that. People who don't believe in interracial marriages. So there's things like that.
Okay. Victoire?
Is society more racist now than it was
in the
back
past?
then?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe that's the case. I mean, nowadays you're seeing that more people are having more equal footing opportunities to get their lives going where they need to go. I mean, listen, I'll give an anecdotal example. There's a guy who is a very close friend of mine, right? I'm in trading, I'm in software development, I do all those sort of stuff, right? So I'm a 0 and 1s kind of person. If you understand that, you understand what I mean by that. And what I do believe, genuinely, is that anyone could really be able to do such a thing as change their life if they really want to. And what I've seen recently is that the person who I got involved in these these capital markets, right? A few months ago, he's a black person, lives in a neighborhood not so well off, right? However, I believe there should be change in the mindset of how we approach our daily lives, right? Because I genuinely believe that the equal opportunities are showing up more and more in these very unfortunate neighborhoods. Because I was able to bring it to him, show it to him that, literally, listen, man, you are able to do this as well as I have. A few months afterward, after a year, he's able to stand on his own 2 feet, and it's exceedingly phenomenally well in these particular capital markets, right? So I see it that way. And in terms of just racist stuff, I don't know that the world is racist now more than it was back then, because back then you couldn't even get in front of the bus. You would have to sit at the back. And what I do believe genuinely is that drama and racism means a lot of cash. And where there is cash, it's going to be intensifiedly pushed up with the media as much as possible. And that makes it seem sometimes as if things are a particular way, when in the real world, they may not actually be the way that we see it.
Okay.
There's a comment from Marsha. She said racism is more prevalent now due to the fact that there are so many more ways of racism getting exposed. Well, let me see. Getting exposed as opposed to 20, 30, or 50 years ago. Cell phone cameras, body cameras, social media has exposed so much more than we've ever experienced before. So I think in that sense, it's like racism has always existed and still exists. And now that we have cameras, we're able to capture it and put it out there. And these, I think it was Will Smith when, we were seeing these deaths of black people by police, and he said that we aren't. It's not that we're more racist now. It's that we're able to catch it on camera now. It's not that I can't remember. You know what?
No, I know exactly.
Yeah,
what
you know which one I'm talking about.
I know.
Okay, so obviously we're deep in the rabbit hole now. Let's talk about the police. And what does it mean when people say we should defund the police? Jahvier, you obviously support that. So let's start with you.
What I would say, what it means to defund the police, I believe it's to take the police force that we currently have and take their pay away, or to just get them some retraining. I mean, certain cops are not devils. They're not evil. There are cops out there that want to really make a change and want to protect people. I'm going to give them that. But there are cops that need to be trained, and they still are on the same stuff that they were on years ago that we were being
So is there a difference though between when people say defund the police? Does that mean abolish the police? Does that mean reduce their budget? Because there are both messages are being sent.
I mean, I feel like it's a little bit of both. I mean, there's people that want the police to be completely abolished, because if you really think about it, the police force was invented for black people back in the days. I mean, I feel like the police force was set out to control the minorities, to control black people, and to make sure that the whites were safe. Back in the day when the police was called, they're gonna attack and they're gonna make sure that they are coming for the black man. I feel like the police force is set out to protect whites, and by defund the police, that means that we need to restructure the force and we need to retrain our officers. Period.
Do you support the idea of defunding the police?
No, absolutely not. I think it's a preposterous idea due to the fact that the inner cities and places in which tends to be very poor, right? Let's look at an example. Let's say Chicago, for example. I mean, homicides in that particular place, 77% of them are committed by the population of black people, which is, when you look at America, it has a population of blacks of 12.2%. I believe according to the data, that population does commit 53.3% of the violent crime within the country, which is the rate is insanely high when you only make up 12.2% of the whole population. So when you look at such neighborhoods, right, which are in dire need of criminal control, and the police does literally bring that in, when you have mothers in Washington, D.C., living in neighborhoods that an average person would never even comprehend, because the mother has to literally serve their children's food on the ground in fear that a stray bullet may hit a door and kill them. And they are in fear of looking at the window and in fear of having their child coming back home dead, because they live in a neighborhood in which life is just unsupportable to that degree. The police comes in there and they bring some sort of order. Right, it brings a level of deterrence to the crime that could perhaps be committed otherwise. And defunding them, as from what the message I've seen, literally means taking all the funding away. And with that, a lot of police officers are leaving the police force. Just last week, 200 police force left the department just because, first of all, of the hate being perpetrated towards the police, as well as the department being defunded. And crime, since this message has been rampant, has skyrocketed. I mean, the correlation there is as obvious as daylight.
I think just
Okay, go ahead, Christina.
just in terms of, I think that it's maybe a misuse of language to say completely defund the police. I don't think people are asking for there to be a entirely police-free state. There's things that we need cops for, because I'll just speak to my own personal experience. Though I never got the police involved when I was assaulted, I knew that I could I could call the police if I needed to, and that would have been a safety net for me. And I think police can be very important for certain things. I think that we just need to think about where we're spending our money and how we can redistribute this money, because look at all the videos that have come out online of mentally ill people who the cops come for them and brutalize them or murder them because they're in distress mentally, and or a child with autism not understanding the protocols of getting pulled over by the police. And we need better training, and money needs to be reallocated to things like mental health initiatives. When somebody's in a mental health crisis, we should not be sending officers with guns. Have one in case this person becomes belligerent and starts hurting people, but we should be putting mental health professionals at the forefront to deal with these mentally ill people. Well, it's things like that. We need to reallocate the funds. It doesn't mean get rid of it altogether.
So here's the thing. That is a point that a lot of people bring up, that say a lot of the times when the police are called, they actually escalate the situation even further. Mm-hmm. So you say that we should, Christine, that we should allocate some of the resources to these mental health professionals. Now, is that going to be the solution, and what is the how much of the police force, how much of the budget do people want to be allocated there?
I just don't think we should be putting all the money into weaponry, and the training clearly isn't working, because we had an officer just a few weeks ago kill Jahvier Wright.
Could have been me.
And the thing is, the police officer claimed that it was because they mistake their taser or their gun for a taser. So these are examples of where training, put more money into training. And also, police officers can become officers faster than you can become a barber. You have to do more training and hours to becoming a hairdresser than you do to becoming a police officer. And I have a big issue with that, because if you are being given weapons and you are being given force, and you are inevitably being given a bit of a power trip, anybody who's in that position has a bit of a power trip. They need to be properly trained. Put the money into more hours to getting these people. We should not have officers thinking that their gun is a taser.
That is completely oh man, that is the craziest thing that I've probably ever heard. These are the people that we're paying all these bucks to protect us, that are using their guns instead of and then that's supposed to be an excuse, and that's just supposed to be these are the things that is happening, and we're just supposed to look past, and these are incidents happening again and again and again, and it's almost just when is this gonna stop?
Victoire, how do you feel about what Christina said in terms of reallocating those resources?
I believe that resources should be reallocated to more training for the police officers in terms of the escalation of the encounters that I do have. I've had wonderful police interactions my whole life. I've never once been in fear, because I do understand that these are normal people, and when put in situations of high level stress in which any movement could turn into a fatal situation from the person being stopped and from the police officer, everybody is on high alert up until that particular interaction has gone over. And for me, what I do tend to see is there are certain police officers who literally may get a job simply, they're power tripping a little bit, and they may literally they are potentially just building up the situation, a bit of intensity into it, just so you could do something for them to have a bit of an excuse to use a bit more use of force. That tends to happen, and genuinely, I've done jobs in which I had to use use of force to some degree as well. And you come to understand that these situations cannot be done by everybody. And not everyone who's being hired by these departments should be in this particular job. There should be better triage and for people to determine who would make a better police officer. The temperament has to be measured to some degree to allow them to be in a certain situation. Because as Christina says, some people do genuinely escalate situations, even though they're police officers. And I agree with her in that wholeheartedly, and I do believe that more training is needed. The weapons being discharged is not as often as it is portrayed, again, according to the data, which can be verified in a given time. But I believe the interaction between the public and the police department has to be really improved, because it is beneficial to both. And when it comes to a situation, for example, my last point, what's the guy's name?
Jahvier, right?
That particular situation, right? When you look into that, there are two ways to look at that story. You could say the police officer made an error that caused it for him to die, or you could look at it the other way, because perspective is a funny thing. He tried to run. That caused another situation to happen. You cannot put blame on one person when there are two parties in a situation who can cause the issue to go in one way or another. My point being, interaction between the public and the police departments has to better. You have to understand there are people just like you and I, they're placed in a position of high stress, and you cannot expect them to be perfect.
Okay, I just want to say firstly, there is a difference between putting somebody in a situation where they're in high stress and putting somebody in a position where they're trained to act and know exactly how to act in that situation, and then being a coward and mistakenly using their gun instead of their taser. You let me know if you're in your field or wherever you work, would you mistakenly use a different, you said you do, what do you do?
Are you asking me my current job?
Yes. Yeah. Like what is your field?
It's a very intense.
So would you mix up something that's very important to your day-to-day schedule? Would you make a big mistake like that?
I have done that once or twice, admittedly.
You would mistake your gun from your taser.
Wait, I didn't say I was a police officer. Now, my current job.
That's what I'm saying. Also, I want to state that Devontae Wright was pulled over because his warrant for his arrest was sent to the wrong address. So they pulled him over because the police department sent his warrant to the wrong address. Their mistake. So that's number one. Then number two, the mistake, you're gonna shoot him with your gun instead of, I mean. So
here's the thing. I don't think what Victoire is saying is
I think my point are genuinely misunderstood, as if I was saying Earth was the moon when I wasn't. My points are not that. My points are that people the way you look at, let's say, for example, Mr. Raben over there, the way you treat him should be the same way you treat a police officer. That's my point. They are people just like you and I. They are prone to mistake simply for being human beings. And being put in high stress situations, mistakes are prone to happen, notwithstanding your training. My point is, they need better training. So I never say that someone should be mistakenly taking a taser and mistaking it for a gun and shoot someone. I never said such things.
Yeah.
I just want to say that we can't use the excuse that they're being put into high stress level situations.
That's what they're trained to do. You're trained to deal with high stress situations.
You're trained to deal with.
Are you not?
Go to training exactly.
I'm trained to be a pro footballer, but I still miss an open net.
Police get sprayed in their eyes with pepper spray for training. You do understand that?
Pardon me?
Police, they're sprayed in their face and their eyes with pepper spray during their training. That's just a part of their training.
I think there's more common ground on this particular point than you do realize. I think you're not understanding my point as I'm attempting to make it. And there are some things that are being conflicted here that I am not particularly making, and there's a genuine misunderstanding of my point. I'm not in total disagreement of you. I'm probably 90% agreement with what you're saying, but I don't believe that you're understanding exactly where I'm coming from.
So if I can jump in here as the namesake of the show, I think where the disagreement is that on the one hand, when this officer made that mistake, a lot of people say that, well, officers aren't held accountable. Now, I don't think what Victoire is saying that is a mistake that's okay. I think that the point he's making is that these mistakes happen. Now, should they be happening? That's the question. If they're supposed to be trained, then these mistakes shouldn't be happening. So police accountability is where I want to take this conversation. And, I have some statistics on that, if I can bring them up, where they are. Police accountability. Okay, so in 2016, more white people were killed by police than black people. However, 2.9 per million is the rate of white people committing the crimes, and 6.6 million is the rate of black people committing the crimes. Now, in 2019, there were an estimated 375 million police interactions. About 1,000 of them ended in shooting fatalities. 14 of those were unarmed blacks, and only one wasn't evading arrest. So that one that wasn't evading arrest is about 0.0000003%. Now, a lot of the cases where there are shootings, police don't get charged. Now, is this a result of a faulty justice system, or is this a result of the police they didn't do anything wrong?
Well, it's a faulty justice system. It's a plain, blatant case of the police are backed by the system. They're protected by the system. The police very much can just do what they like, and there's no repercussions. That's exactly how I feel. I feel like I've said already, there are good police. The police are here to serve and protect, yes, but there are police officers that use their force to a different level that doesn't need to be used, which is a fact.
And I think Victoire, you made a comment about, Devontae Wright was running. Who cares? Because cops are not trained to kill.
Because
and you should not get shot for running.
I mean, to a degree, they are trained.
My point is
to have to kill in that situation.
Exactly.
So why is it that
he ran into a car? They could not. I mean, listen. You're running into a car. Your hands are concealed to some degree. The police officers are trained to expect the worst of any situations when they are not in control of it. You must understand that. If you do not, please become a police officer and tell me how it goes for you, because I guarantee you do not have the temperament. I guarantee that's because you do not have the temperament to become a police officer. It's not a job.
Man, how are you going to tell me I don't have the?
It's not a job.
If I wanted to become a pig, I would.
Okay, please, you could. My point is, it is not a job for everybody who walks this earth to become a police officer. And as I mentioned earlier, there should be triage of people who have better temperament to literally be able to handle those kind of stress in these particular sort of situations. There are causes to any particular situation, most of the time by both parties. It can't just be blamed on one simply because it has a bias towards what the narrative is. That's my whole point. If I take personal responsibility in that case, and I don't attempt to run, for example, I don't attempt to do anything dodgy. If the police officer tells me to get out of the car and I believe he's infringing on my rights, the thing I personally do, I'll allow them to do that, even if I know that they are. You know why? Because they do have a camera, and I'm also allowed to record them. I can take it to court any time. And
you don't know if you're going to be able to take that to court, because you don't know if you're going to be alive to take this to court.
Well, you will be alive by complying.
Let's really be realistic here.
Yeah, I'm being as realistic as you can be.
You're not, because you're...
Let's let Victoire...
A second ago, you said that, how can I tell you that you have a better temperament? So please don't tell me how I'm not being realistic.
Continue with your point.
Let's stay from the harder minimums here, please. My point being is simply, if I comply with the police officer's command, even if I know that they are in fact infringing on my rights, for me, what I believe, the better case is to allow them to do that. First of all, because they do have a camera. Secondly, you're also allowed to film. Those are literally your best weapons. You can take those to court. You can FOIA request their body cams anytime. They do have 30 days for them to give it to you. You can do that. You bring that along with you to court, and you can also file a complaint, and you can take it along that way. At least in that instance, you come out of that situation alive. That's what I mean by better interacting with the police officers.
Okay,
I'm going to be honest with you, man. You sound very privileged right now. You sound very privileged, and you sound like somebody who these things that we're speaking about, these topics that we're speaking about, you almost feel like these things can't happen to you.
Well,
we're speaking about topics and situations that are not only happening every month or happening these are constantly happening around the city almost every week.
I mean, with regards to how much it's happening, how has the media played into how much of this is happening? Are they over-reporting? Are they under-reporting?
The media is actually under-reporting. The media, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, Raben, sorry, I've been conflicting your name with
Come on, you got to know the show that we're on. We can't get that wrong.
I mean, look, they're both Jewish, they both look alike. I'm joking. But the point being, if you, again, 19 people were shot in 2016, but the media made it seem as if it was 50,000 of them that did. That's the whole point. They do play a big part into this, pushing a particular narrative. Because again, as I said, when you look at the numbers, drama sells. The more intensified drama is, the more people will tune in, the more money they can make. I'm not saying these situations don't happen. My point is, in this particular case, that they happen at a lesser rates than the media is portraying them to be.
So in regards to the media's portrayal, now you say that the media is underreporting. So in 2020, 1,127 people were killed by police. Only 16 of those cases had officers charged, which is only 1%. Mm-hmm. 80 of those people were unarmed, 27 were black, and 31 were white. So in terms of the reporting, like, we didn't hear about 1,000 people killed. Mm-hmm. So is there a reason that certain cases are being reported and certain not? Are they the ones that deserve more justice, or are they the ones that the media is selective about? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I personally feel like the media is just selective about the types of media that they want to share and the types of fatalities and things that they want to promote. I mean, I personally feel like there are many incidents that happen all over the world that the media doesn't want to cover. Personally, also, I feel like the media will only cover things that are going big at the moment. The media will only cover things that are the topic, the main topic, or what everybody's talking about. You know, the whole George Floyd thing.
Yeah, which is where I wanted to talk about as well.
You know, I feel like that really, along with us genuinely caring about what really happened, I mean, it really took off because there was so many people online and throughout social medias who really wanted to change and who really are seeing this and are seeing how is this still what our society is. So,
but do you think that the George Floyd incident is a reflection of our society, or do you think it's an isolated incident?
It is a reflection of our society. That is exactly how the police treat us, and that's exactly how these things go. And that's exactly what it is. It's a perfect example of how our society is.
Would you agree, or would you disagree, Victoire?
I wouldn't.
You would feel, sorry to cut you off, one last thing. You would feel like you have some type of power to sit on someone's back for that long to kill them. You killed somebody by crushing them.
I haven't even had a chance to speak, my friend.
Go ahead. I didn't say a thing to you. I'm letting you speak now. Go ahead.
I was given the chance to speak and you cut me off.
I just said I wanted to end my last...
Okay, so let's go to Victoire.
Let's have a cordial conversation, please. That's all I'm advocating for here.
Go ahead.
I even lost my train of thought. Bloody hell.
About George Floyd okay, go ahead.
I just was going to weigh in on the whole media aspect. I think the media does only show us what they want to see, and everybody knows that the media has an agenda, and that's things are going to be misrepresented, and there's crimes that aren't talked about. And you talked about it in the Raben rant last week, and Tanya just made a comment. Why did nobody talk? I'm sorry, I forget her name.
Sarah Halimi. Why was that not reported on? That's a discrepancy in the media. They decided not to shed light on the racialized killing of a Jewish woman. You know, like, and that Jews do experience the most hate crimes of any minority group.
And so so one thing that I think, you know, when we talk about these things, of course, there's things that are left out, and there's things that the media isn't going to talk about because they have a message that they whatever.
So how has the media's coverage of Black Lives Matter been? Has it been?
It's been mixed depending on where you look at where it's coming from. If it's coming from Fox News, they all wish that Derek Chauvin was found innocent. You look at CNN, they think his punishment should have been harsher. So it just depends on where you're getting your information. Every outlet has some kind of bias and some kind of opinion.
Not everyone can be the Raben Report.
No, not everyone can be the Raben Report.
Okay, so let's talk about a little more on George Floyd. Do you believe he got justice? And did the jury make the right decision? Was it a fair trial? What do you think?
Personally, that man is not here to this day to be breathing and living, to be with his family. So personally, no, justice has not been served. But have we done what we could? I guess so.
Victoire?
in terms, did he get the justice that he deserves?
Deserved, yeah.
What would have been the greatest way of doing that? I mean, the man who committed the murder has been charged accordingly. He's in prison. And, I mean, I'm not sure what else we could have done in terms of rectifying the case.
Okay, so George Floyd obviously is the reason that there were so many protests this past year. Let's talk about a recent piece of news that happened. It was about Ma'Khia Bryant. She was fatally shot by an Ohio police officer while trying to stab another person. Some people have called the officer a hero, whereas others blasted him. I know LeBron James actually tweeted a picture of the officer saying, "You are next," but quickly deleting it. So there's a lot of indecision about the officer's actions. Did the officer make the right call, or did he escalate the situation?
I believe he made the right call in that instance, because
You didn't.
On video.
The officer did not. You killed. This is what I'm trying to say, and I'm confused.
Let me
Go
just
ahead,
finish.
sorry.
Let
Go
Victoire
ahead.
finish. Then
Go
we're going to
ahead.
come to you.
Mhm.
Thank you. My point was, on camera, you can clearly see it. There was two people who were fighting, and one of them had a knife. She was about to stab another person standing by without any sort of defense whatsoever. As a police officer, you're meant to neutralize the threat at any given moment when you see it's escalating, as evidently as it did on the video. Now, in that instance, according to the training, you're meant to neutralize that particular threat. And the officer did exactly what he had to do by the books. So I believe he did make the right decision. He saved one woman's life instead of letting her being bludgeoned and stabbed to death by another person.
Okay. Jahvier, you disagree. Why is that?
Definitely, because as a police officer, I mean, you should even know this, that there's ways to de-escalate situations.
With the knife to your neck?
You're a cop who is trained to deal with these types of things, and you're telling me that your only option is to kill this little girl? Come on, man.
Can I make one point? Are you forgetting the fact that she had a knife and 2 inches away from stabbing that woman standing by the car? Are you forgetting that fact or not? Because it's clearly on that video. If the police officer didn't shoot that person, she would have stabbed her in an instant.
Let me get this clear.
No, I'm asking just one question, please.
You believe that police officer killing that little girl was the best option for him to
would you have rather
answer the question? Just let me.
I did ask you a question 2 seconds ago. You didn't answer it.
Okay, so let's start with the question you asked, Victoire.
My
and then we're gonna ask
question
the
was:
question.
there is clear evidence on video of the police officer. I mean, of the girl who was trying to stab the other girl, literally holding a dog. My question is, would you have rather the police officer stood by and did absolutely nothing, which again, they probably would have been portrayed as, oh, well, he failed to do his job. And now that he shot her to neutralize the threat, it's being portrayed as, well, he overdid what he was supposed to do in that particular situation. So what the question then I suppose is, what would have been the better outcome in that situation with a police officer? And how would he have stopped her from stabbing that person at that instant?
Okay, so I just want to start with, you killing that little girl was not the way to de-escalate that situation. Personally, I know that officer could have disarmed that little girl from that knife that she had, instead of having to kill her.
My question is, how do you do that?
Speaking.
How do you de-escalate?
What do you mean, how do you do that?
Well, you said you know, so I'm asking you, how do you do that?
You disarm her, and
she's like that, about to stab a person. How do you disarm her in that instance?
So
that's my question.
And that's why I asked you, do you feel like him killing her was the best option that he had? There's no way that makes any sense.
What I'm saying is, according to the training, she was a threat to another human being who was unarmed, holding a dog.
This is a little girl we're also talking about.
She could be a little girl. She could be an older person. She's still unarmed with another person 1 foot away from stabbing her. Are you literally omitting that fact?
You're a grown man with trained skills on how to disarm people, and I know that. And you're telling me that your best option was...
Well, it's true. If you go and you just look up video, like YouTube, how the police de-escalate in other countries, like the UK. There's a video of a man on bath salts, which is one of the most... It's one of the drugs that makes you the most aggressive and violent. There's a man butt naked on bath salts with a machete, and the police were able to disarm him without ever drawing their guns. There are ways to
this
not
is what I'm saying.
shoot.
There are ways to
Was
go
he
about
also
this.
about to stab someone?
Yes, he was he was butt naked holding a machete.
Did he have a person a foot away from him? That's
come
my whole
on.
point. Instances are different. You cannot take one
He
instance and
was
compare
close
it to
enough.
the
He was
next.
close enough to. He was close enough to kill the police officers if he wanted to. There was. I'm sure there was
Okay,
other civilians around. So
Okay,
we're
but-
not gonna say that. We're not gonna say that because she had.
My
because she-
questions
like,
are
no,
not
we're
being
gonna do that.
answered. So I mean,
I think he. Well, to be fair, I do think he is answering your questions.
no,
I
they,
think
they aren't.
Well,
my,
the
my
question-
question was
he's-
simply, how do you de-escalate in that situation?
And
He's
I
saying-
and I
he's
stated
saying-
this already.
Okay, so
he's not a police officer, and he is not trained in disarming.
Thank you,
They
Thank
police
you.
officers are trained in disarming. So your question
feel-
needs to be positioned
But here's-
towards somebody
here's the
that
thing.
is a trained
could
police
you
officer.
could you
here's the-
represent my point a little better, please?
Right, as a devil's advocate, that's what I'm here to do. So the point is that if Jahvier did give his perspective saying that there is a better option, then Victoire is asking him, what is that
What
option?
is that option?
So,
and I've stated to disarm this little. This
My
young
question
lady.
is, how do you do that disarming?
Do you want
That's
me to
my
send you a
question.
YouTube
You'll,
link?
you'll need to speak to a police officer to
thank
hear
you.
how
You'll need to
somebody
speak to a
disarms.
police
But
officer
you
so
have-
you can get that
I have
information.
contacted
I
police
don't- I don't
officers
think
all the
so.
time.
Feel
Okay,
that
so-
I
talk
wouldn't be
to
able
them
tell
about
you.
how
So
they
all
disarm.
agree that was
so no one's, when we all talk over each other, we're not going to hear anybody. So in terms of that specific incident, he wasn't at a distance where he could actually touch the individual, right? So does context matter? This is the question.
In terms of what?
In terms of any
always
situation.
does.
In terms of any situation. So with regards to Micaiah Bryant, so she was 16, and obviously the police officer killed her.
Mm-hmm.
Does that matter that she was 16? That she was a young girl? Does it matter that she was, or what's more important, that she was trying to stab someone? Like, how do you value the situation when you look at all these incidents?
Which is a good question. I feel like that is a very good question. And I feel like being a police officer, you're supposed to have this training. You're supposed to have this mindset to know when you're put in these types of situations, how exactly to go about this.
Now,
You
in
see-
regards to the officer, his thoughts were this is the way to de-escalate the situation. So how do you determine whether an officer has made the right move?
Based off of the setting and how the whole thing played out. I mean, personally, you can look at a few different things. You can look at the person's gender. Was this a man that we're talking about? Is this a grown man? Is this a little boy? Is this a female? Is this this is a little girl that we're talking? I'm sure that this grown man was able to disarm this little girl and change the result of how the whole thing played out.
And Marsha just made a comment, and she said, "What happened to just shooting someone in the arm or leg instead of shooting them to end their life?"
That is
What happened
absolute
to that?
insanity. I'm an armsman. I've been shooting guns for all my life. Arms and legs are genuinely the smallest targets on your body. Do you know why people wear body armor and go into war? Because they know the chance of being hit in the head are 0 to none. Same with their arms and legs. That's why you aim for the mass point of the body.
Especially when they're moving. right?
Exactly. That's why you do it. Aiming to someone's head is the most ridiculous thing you could try to do because you play Call of Duty and you think it's realistic. No, it isn't. You can come with me shooting anytime. You'll realize how hard it is actually shooting.
Well, Jake Beck actually agrees with you and disagrees with Marsha. He says, you aim for the chest because it's the largest target that has been the training since the beginning of time. If you shoot someone in the leg and they successfully murder the person, you have now failed as a cop, and that's more on you than shooting the attacker. So obviously, let's assume that that shooting is not an option. Like, what would be the way to disarm the situation?
The same way that other cop did, where she mistook her gun for her taser, mistook her taser for her gun. He should have mistook his gun for his taser.
No, you're being
Exactly.
disingenuous. Come
No,
on.
I'm not
I mean,
at all.
You do realize that in terms of adrenaline, in certain cases, there's
Man,
been
we're not gonna keep blaming this on adrenaline and being in a chaotic situation.
I've never
Wait, come on,
mentioned
we're not gonna keep
adrenaline
doing
once
that
in
at all.
this
Hold on.
in this podcast.
Weak.
Mike, I haven't actually interrupted you the amount of times you have me. Please, could you allow me just to speak?
You have interrupted me a
Okay,
couple of times.
so what we're going to do is we're not going to interrupt anybody anymore. Victoire is going to finish this point, then I'm going to go back to Jahvier, and then Christina will be able to chime in.
And what was the question again, please?
What would have been the right way to disarm if shooting wasn't an option? Like when Jahvier mentioned that the officer should have used their taser, would that have been a solution to de-escalate it? Would that have worked?
There are many cases in these instances where, right, when a taser's been deployed, and the person who the taser's been deployed on actually overrode it, and it didn't work, notwithstanding how much power and watts were being inputted into that particular taser to being inputted into a person's body. So there are instances that happen, they don't work. The other point, as you mentioned, the officer was a bit too far for him to actually reach the person in time to perhaps use Krav Maga or any sort of martial arts technique to disarm that person. They were too far. Now the question then remains, was the girl who was holding that dog, did her life matter in this situation, or did it not, simply because a white officer shot her? What if the officer was black? Would that have changed the situation? Or would that have made it the same? Because he's an officer and therefore he should not shoot a person, and he was miles away from them. Did that girl's life matter in this incident, or should we have let that woman simply stab her to death in that situation?
So that is an interesting point you bring up. Would the situation have been different if the officer was black, in your eyes, Jahvier?
Personally, I don't think it would have changed. It wouldn't have changed a thing.
Because
at the end of the day, there's a way to have gone about the situation, and that's what we're talking about here. That's what we're dealing with, is the way that the situation was handled, and it was handled incorrectly. It doesn't matter who it was who conducted it; it was handled incorrectly.
And I will say that I have personally seen, people in distress, going through a mental health crisis, who act violently and irrationally, and I still don't think that the right thing to do, depending on the circumstances, is to shoot and kill. I understand that there's circumstances where, and it's a long way away, but the Kiwan commented, he said, let me just find it quickly, but he basically said that police officers are trained, so police officers are trained to use their guns as a last resort. However, it always is the first solution for them. So I think that this just speaks to the fact that, yes, police officers as a last resort can shoot, and they do, and there's certain circumstances where, people have, a mass shooter, okay?
So
I'm just saying that the issue that Jahvier and I are kind of bringing up here is that the first thing they're doing is resorting to violence, which is not how it should be handled. That should not be the first option that these police officers are using.
So two questions. Number one, is this how most incidences occur? Are police just constantly going to violence, or is this an isolated incident? And number two, what would have been the other way to de-escalate it?
And I feel like this is why the black community is so angry, because it seems to be every time that that situation does happen, it happens to be a black individual and they end up dying. Why is it every time that somebody is pulled over from a busted taillight or whatever they're pulled over by? It doesn't matter. It has to end with somebody losing their life. I mean, why is it that you can't use any of your other training, any of your other skills to de-escalate a situation? Your first resort is to murder somebody to come to a resolution. I don't see it.
Anything you'd like to say? No? Anything?
Please repeat the question, please.
Jahvier was just saying that using violence, using your weapon should be a last resort, and that there should be other training, right? Mm-hmm. So, Jahvier also says that you said that this isn't an isolated incident. This is how most interactions, you think, go?
Yeah, I feel like this is how most interactions, especially with usually being white police officers, when it has to deal with a black individual, this is usually how it plays out.
So what do you think about the fact that Toronto has had a black police chief? Mm-hmm. Does that show that we're trying to eradicate racism, systemic racism, or do you think that
I
just
don't think that
anomaly?
It changes the thought process of any of the police officers that are on the road at that moment?
So what's the way to change their mindset? What is the solution, in your opinion?
Police officers need to be retrained. They need to be. They need to take a what is the class called? They need to have a
Anger management? Is that what?
Not even anger management, just more de-escalation, more of like a class where they can just understand that we're a society of
diversity and
many
inclusion.
different people.
Diversity and inclusion training.
I feel like, especially in the police force, there's a super white. I wouldn't even know if it's white supremacy, but it's just there's a white privilege type of deal going on in the force, and they need to completely just get rid of that whole thing and just rebrand.
Okay, so would you say that police are generally just racist towards black people? Like that is the...
I'm not going to say that. I don't want to sit here and be like, all police are racist. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I just feel like there is obviously a few police officers that are obviously racist, but there's just... It's like a... It's just we just need to do better, man.
And I will say, you know, it's more than just it's racism across the board, and there's Latinos who face this discrimination in the States as well, especially. My father has been the victim of, you know, police unfair treatment from police based on, you know, calling him a spick based on his ethnicity, and there isn't, and these are direct real life experiences that we're talking about here. And I think it's important to flag that just because you haven't experienced something doesn't mean it doesn't happen, you know.
Okay, so in terms of, you know, let's pivot from Akaya, Bryant, because obviously I don't think we're going to reach a consensus in terms of the situation. Let's talk about the actual BLM protests, because that was the biggest thing in the news. Are looting and destruction of property acceptable parts of protesting? Is violence justified?
Definitely want to touch and tap in on this. I would say no. Looting and rioting is not a part of protesting, because the protesters, the people that really want change and that are there to spread awareness and want things to be different, they're not the ones that are running into the stores, and they're not the ones that are breaking things and setting things on fire.
So you don't think the people that do the looting and destruction are a part of Black Lives Matter?
Personally, I would say I don't think that they're a part of Black Lives Matter. If they are, that is a completely different. We have to separate the two, regardless if they do support Black Lives Matter or not. Rioting and looting is completely separate from the Black Lives Matter protest and movement. We cannot intertwine the two, or the three. Sorry.
Rioting and looting. Well, funny enough, they do call it material liberalization. Kind of find that term a little funny. But to be fair, I don't believe they accomplish too much, especially when they are legitimately hurting businesses and communities in which the black population is living in these instances, as you could see, again, according to verifiable data. I don't believe it's achieving much, because there were a lot of instances in which black business owners were genuinely hurt because they've spent years and years creating these businesses, building them up from the ground up, and it's helping them hold on to the life that they do have, and then in an instant have protests and riots literally take that away. And I think, lastly, I won't take too much here. I believe that, as you saw in your consensus earlier, your poll earlier, which said basically people don't want to associate with the organization, but they give the message. Mm-hmm. I believe the fact that these riots and looting have been tied so closely to the Black Lives Matter movement itself has been what why people on that polling were saying, well, we don't like the organization, but we do support the message, which I wholeheartedly believe everybody should.
Personally, I think we should focus less on the looting itself and more on the financial gap of black individuals and the billionaires, and why do these people feel like they need to loot in such a situation? Why is the economy so low and these people feel like they need to do that? Like, you kind of understand where I'm coming from?
Well, a lot of people would say that looting is their form of protest, and property of destruction of property doesn't matter when you're fighting for justice for people that are killed. So, I mean, they are identifying themselves as part of the movement, but you don't think that is an acceptable way, is what you're saying?
I would say personally not. The people that are there to genuinely make change, they're there to make change. And those are the people that are standing on the front line, and they'll go head to head and they'll go face to face with those people in the SWAT gear and all that stuff. Those are the protesters. That's who I'm referring to. The people that are breaking it into the H&Ms and the Gucci and Louis Vuitton, it's like that. Those aren't protesters. Those people.
So you don't consider themselves as people who truly advocate for change?
I wouldn't be able to say 100% that that's how I feel, because they can have some part of themselves that feels like there needs to be change, but at the same time, their mind is not where it fully needs to be. Because if they genuinely, completely cared about change, then we would be able to get it done in a better way.
Okay. Victoire, do you have anything to add in regards to the... I mean, I feel like you both agree here that looting and protesting is not the source of change.
That's how I feel. I mean, I feel like looting and protesting is obviously not right. But I mean, if that's... Yeah, I mean, you got to give it to them. Black people are so angry that they're gonna that is how they feel. They feel like they want to protest and they want to loot. And I personally feel like, yeah, it's not right, but do what you have to do. After so many years of being oppressed, and for this to be still going on, I think it's the least that they're doing.
So violence, in your eyes, is acceptable in certain instances, they are justified because of what you say that they've suffered.
Yeah, in some case.
Okay, Victoire.
I mean, sorry to cut you off. I feel like it's almost it's a type of thing where it's like there's almost so much you can take. You know, you can only take so much. You can only put up with so much after so many years. We're in 2021 and we're still dealing with these same issues. So I mean, for them to be looting and rioting, it's not shocking to me personally.
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, when it's hurting the people that the organization claim to be moving forward for, then I guess it's a bit counterproductive to the message that's being perpetrated by the organization itself, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. And I mean, Martin Luther King was also a very angry man, and he wanted change, and he did accomplish that in mostly peaceful ways, right? So there are ways to move on forward to bring about change that doesn't bring about looting, rioting, or any sort of violence whatsoever. I mean, I forget the man's name, but there was a man, black guy, actually, he in America, right? He maybe you should look into it. I forgot his name really, but phenomenal man. I really like the guy. You know, he was able to speak to a few KKK members.
I know who you're talking
exactly.
about. Yeah.
Do you know how he did that? He didn't slap them or hit them or be angry at them. He had a conversation with them because he understood that interpersonal relationships are what bring about change in people's mindset and ideas. If you imagine that this particular man was to approach these KKK members and bring about violence to them, it would have never changed their minds. It would have rather intensify their hatred towards the black person's color rather than change it in whatsoever. So when you understand that the person is a human being and you understand that you can genuinely have a conversation with them, but you have to do it in a way that you understand on which wavelength that they're operating on. Once you understand the wavelengths, you get on it, it is much easier for you to change that person's mind, direction of thought, and you can bring about change that is necessary to a better society. And this man, by having loads of KKK members, disenfranchising and denouncing the KKK as an organization and as a way of thought, he proved that this can be done in a non-violent way.
Well, so a lot of people, just to counteract that, a lot of people would say that the changes that people want to bring are not able to be done just by a simple conversation. You know, there has to be an uproar. There has to be people need to be noticed, right? And I guess looting and these protests, that's their way of being noticed. So it's just a matter of tactics. You believe, Victoire, that there is a way around looting and violence. Do you think that it's not necessary at all? Or it's not necessary in this situation?
In this situation, I mean, the reason why people say they don't like the organization was because of the looting and the violence. If that looting wasn't there, I believe more people in your poll would have still supported the Black Lives organization along with the message rather than simply the Black Lives message than the organization. So the way it's being done has to be tactful. Conversation has to start somewhere. I mean, include politicians and elect people who you believe can bring about change, and let them do that thing with legislations and mandates.
Would you say it's the same thing as the feminist movement? Because a lot of people don't identify as part of the actual movement, but they agree with, the original message of equality for men and women?
To some degree, I would agree that it is so. I mean, there are different versions of feminists out there nowadays, and I don't believe everybody has that particular version in their head, and they agree with it, right? It's like the same with the Bible. There are hundreds of versions of the Bible portraying a particular message that may be different than what you and I may believe, and you may believe one part of the Bible that I don't, but we still believe in the same message. It's just the way we're going about it that we believe is quite counterproductive to what we believe. Okay,
Jahvier, you wanted to touch upon Victoire's point.
Kind of lost my train of thought at the moment. Give it to Christina. I'll hopefully get it back.
I think, I do think that from as a white woman, I do think that I need to hear the voices of the people that this affects, more than, it's not that I can't speak on the topic. I'm still entitled to have an opinion. I can still weigh in. I just do think the most important thing that we need to do as a society moving forward is to really listen to these Black experiences. And we have to also acknowledge that one person's experience will not necessarily be another person's experience. And there is privilege within the Black community as well. There are Black people who will be more successful and have more opportunity. And so, we can't say we can't put, we have to listen to all sides of the experience and I don't really know what I'm trying to get at. I'm just saying that I think that these conversations are good and we should continue to have these moving forward. And I think we really need to listen to the people that this affects the most.
And that's why we're having this discussion, right? Because we do have two people here. You're both Black, but you both have different ways of thinking about the whole situation. So this brings us to the future, because we've spent a lot of time on this. We went a little over because it's a very interesting topic. It's a very important topic, and I appreciate you both being here and giving us your perspectives. And I'm sure Christina feels the exact same way. So, in terms of the future, how do we heal this racial and political divide in North America? Because clearly there is one if we're having this discussion and we're talking about this organization.
Like I said, I feel like we just need to start with being more open to understanding how other people live and how other people, how their lives have gone, and just really just being a better person and kind of just gaining that knowledge that we need to understand another human being.
Victoire?
There are no points of contentions on my behalf on these points just now, which is good. So there's a point of commonality there, I suppose. I mean, it's fair. I mean, as you mentioned, it's rather important to understand another person's perspective, right? I feel like when I leave on here, they're going to call me Uncle Tom, right? Which is the general term that people like me who have a disparity in opinion with the majority tend to have. But then again, notwithstanding, I do not.
Which we condemn, because everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Exactly. But my point being, as you mentioned, it's fair to have conversations. I believe those are what bring about change. Violence doesn't bring so much of it, to be fair. So the more you're able to listen to the voices that are mostly heard by these structures, so to speak, I believe we would start seeing better implemented and change around these particular structures. Again, I wholeheartedly believe that anybody could really do what they set their mind to, given the right opportunity, so long as they're able to get their footing in the right doors, they can genuinely get that going. I've seen it time and time again, whether you're a Hispanic person, Black or white. I've seen it more with Black people than I have seen it with anybody else. So genuinely, I suppose I live in a different world, but I know this reality exists and it can be done. It has to be a change of mindset. And so lastly, I'll say, I never experienced racism in Africa, or knew even about what race was until I moved to North America, because no one fucking cares about races in Africa unless you're in North America.
I did not know are you serious?
Yeah.
I would have.
I mean, Bill C-10 hasn't come into effect yet.
I just wanted to say, I feel like I definitely understand why your views are the way they are, because okay, so let me say this. I have a lot of family in Jamaica. That's where I'm from. And I used to go to Jamaica all the time before this whole COVID thing. And one thing I can definitely say is, if there's one place that I don't see a lot of racism, and I feel like when I'm there, I feel almost like I'm just fully included and there's nothing to worry about, is Jamaica, or it's, you know, the place where you go back to where you're from, you know?
Right.
There's those places you don't deal with racism out there because everybody just,
they know they have to get by and get their lives in order, and
it's almost as if we're all the same. We don't deal with.
As I say, when I moved to North America, then I realized, oh, Victoire is black. I didn't know that I was, because I didn't care. No one cares for it.
So what do you think of when people say they don't see color? Is that fair? Is it offensive?
I feel like...
Sorry, I'll just make a I think it's fair. I mean, actually, I think it's a bit silly. Obviously, everybody does see color, but I think in a way they mean is that they're not wanting to judge people based off that particular color, right? Which I think it's fair, and people should move forward with that. Again, if you have the abilities to do something, to be funny, to be a great sportsman, whatever it is that you're able to do, I don't think your color should really play in a role into you getting an opportunity to do something or getting from one stage to another, right? That's what I believe.
Do you think in North America that's possible, that the color of your skin is not going to be a factor that prevents you from succeeding?
I think it matters at this particular point quite a bit more than it should, simply because there's a lot of emphasis in the media of racism. I think the more you talk about it, the more you make it prevalent, the more people are likely to look towards it and actually consider it. Then, as I said, for me, the way I grew up, places I've been, no one speaks about it. No one really cares. We look at people as who they are and judge them on the basis of their character.
Okay.
And I completely grasp and I understand your views, because coming from, you said you're from Africa, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So coming from Africa, you wouldn't see a lot of racism out there, and I completely understand now. It's like coming here, this is like a whole new, you know, it's almost like a whole new world. It's like I'm not used to this type of stuff where I'm from, you know, so. I definitely feel that, and I definitely understand your views now.
So the final question is, will we ever live in a world that everyone agrees is truly equal?
Personally, I don't think there's such a thing as a utopia in whatever scenario that you wish to have it in. Unfortunately, I mean, you could be the greatest president or the greatest basketball player, wherever you are, you could be the greatest, but someone will always say, well, you're utterly rubbish. And they will denigrate you till they die. So as much as it is a wonderful idea to have, I think we can advance forward with certain incentives in communities that need the most help, in particular the black community to some degree. I think, again, investing money into those communities and literally giving them opportunities that they may not have otherwise, which is what I believe education is really important. Giving them such opportunities, at least having the option of doing one A, B, and C, that would open the minds of people into exploring who they could be, instead of saying, well, you're this way, and that's what you will be.
And that's why you don't think, my assumption is that's why you don't think that Black Lives Matter is doing that, because they're not supporting the black community the way that you want to see them supporting it.
In the way that I want to see it done, no.
Okay. And Jahvier?
What was
in regards to, will we ever live in a world that's truly equal, that everyone agrees is truly equal?
Nah, definitely we'll never be in a world where everybody believes is equal. We have a lot of work to be done, but what we can do in the meantime is kind of just work towards just understanding that, like, we were born like this. I was born black. You were born white. We were born black. Like, let's just
white passing.
You know, let's just take it for what it is, and let's just, like, you know, everybody just calm down. Let's just accept each other for what it is. We're on this earth. We don't know how the hell we got here. So we're really spending all this time being racist and being, like, you know, being bigots. I mean, come on. I feel like we can do so much better with the time that we have on this earth. And as humans, man, let's do better.
But so do you think that most people think like the four of us, in terms of we're just trying to live our lives and we're nice to each other? Or do you think more people have these views that are prejudiced? Back to your question, even when you said, do I feel like we're in a world more that's less racist or more racist? I feel like we're in a world, obviously, right now that is less racist. We came from slavery, and, you know, I feel like we're definitely at a better stage, but we're not at the stage
that we know we can get to, because we can do it, man. It really just takes, like, if we really think about how do we end this racism thing, it's really just a matter of everybody just being.
Well, how does it end in your eyes? Like, how will we know? How will you know that we're at that point?
When every single person is accepting, and everybody is accepting of every single race, and they let people be them and do them and have their views on what they view. Being racist and being prejudiced based on someone's skin is not it. That is not the way to live.
And do you think most people do you think most people are prejudiced based on skin color? That's the question.
In this day and age, I feel like no. We've got maybe back then, and you know, but nah, we're doing pretty good now. There are definitely a few of us, but no, we're definitely doing better, and we're getting better for sure.
I agree. I think that it's definitely not, the issue of judging people based on race is definitely not as prevalent as it once was. Of course, it still exists, and there's some people who are always going to be that way, especially the older generations, current day. But I think we're getting to a point where we're moving away from that, and from what I can see, we are accepting and loving of all people more than we ever have been.
Interesting, and I think that's a really great way to end the show. Well, that was our show for this week. Thank you to everyone that tuned in for this extra long episode. We really appreciate it. Victoire and Jahvier, thank you both so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate this, for real.
Likewise, I appreciate it.
Of course, and that's, I was, we were talking about doing this episode, but we obviously wanted to be sensitive, and an opportunity arose. The fact that Anna's away, we were able to bring in two guests with different points of view, and that's the point of the show. That's what we've tried to do for the last 5 years. This is episode 97, so
wow.
Again, we truly appreciate it. So once again, that was our show. Thanks to everyone that tuned in, messaged us live. We got a lot of action. As I just mentioned, we've got 3 episodes left. Only 3, Christina.
I want to be a guest on you guys' next episode. I got a lot of shit to say. Listen, I did not know we were allowed to swear on here. You guys, everybody tuning in, you will see me again, okay? And I will be back and better. Thank you so much for having me, man. I just want to say that again.
Yeah.
Loved having you. And Jahvier, it's a dear friend of mine. I'm so glad he could be on the show. Love you too.
And Victoire's a good friend of mine.
Victoire is a good friend
I
of
want to
yours.
say, I respect you, man. At first, I didn't know if I liked you.
Nobody likes me. Don't worry, I'm used to it.
Hey, nobody likes me.
Man.
You should see me get canceled every episode. So
I'm the namesake of the show, and people have tried to get rid of the show. I think I win. So, again, 3 episodes left. It's crazy how time flies. So you do not want to miss those 3 episodes. This episode was one for the record books. Once again, finally, that was our show. Thanks to everyone that tuned in. Anna will be back next week. A brand new episode of the Raben Report will be coming to you next week. Same day, same time, same people. Have a good night, everyone.